Tonight, we're delighted to bring you Black, Indigenous, Youth of Color experiences in San Mateo County and aspirations for the future. This is part of the Equity Through Art series that County Library, Behavioral Health Office of Diversity and Equity, and myself have been partnering on. Our wonderful panelists today include Erika Ramachandran, Tamilala Shobo-Maheen, Emily Goa, and Michelle Chen. The County Youth Commissioners Valeria Chavez-Franco, Karla Aguilar, Nicholas Reed, and Austin Willis will be moderating. The future of San Mateo County is BIPOC youth. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. Demographic changes in our county, in California, and across the nation trend towards continued growth in our communities of color and increasing majorities of BIPOC. This is a beautiful trend that deepens existing diversity of our already diverse county, with 64% identifying as non-white. BIPOC youth already hold leadership roles in our county, including on the County Youth Commission, where they bring their youth perspectives and voice to decision makers on the County Board of Supervisors. But not all BIPOC youth feel accepted or celebrated in all settings across the county. There are tensions that BIPOC youth hold as they continue to forge ahead to build a stronger and more connected future for San Mateo County. This webinar panel is organized by a fabulous subcommittee of that County Youth Commission, including Valeria, Carla, Nicholas Reed, and Austin, as I mentioned before, with support from county staff, Saba Bokharey, which has been really helpful to have. Hearing directly from diverse youth leaders is critical for the county's understanding of who we are, as well as who we can be in the future. As we in San Mateo County reckon with racial inequities, it's critical to understand the experiences of BIPOC youth and their aspirations for a better tomorrow. The Equity Through Art series really takes us on this journey to understand the experiences of Black, Indigenous communities of color through their voices and stories. Now I'd like to turn it over to Valeria Chavez-Franco from the Youth Commission to introduce herself and pass it to other commissioners to introduce themselves and the panelists. After the panel, we'll take questions from the audience, so feel free to post your questions as they come up for you into the Q&A section of this Zoom feature. All right, I'd like to turn it over to Valeria now.
Hello, my name is Valeria. I am a sophomore at Woodside Priory School, and this is my first year on the Youth Commission, and I'm so happy to be introducing the commissioners as well as the panelists, and I will pass it over to Austin.
Thank you, Valeria. I'm Austin. I'm a senior at Crystal Springs. I'm the chair of the Youth Commission, and this is my third year on the commission. I will pass it on to Carla.
Hello, my name is Karla Aguilar. I am a current senior at Notre Dame High School in Belmont, and this is my second year on the San Mateo Youth Commission, and I'm very excited to be here and to hear from students of color who have their art to share today.
Hi guys, my name is Nick, and I am a senior at Burlingame High School. I've been on the Youth Commission for 2 years now, and I'm just excited to get started.
Thank you, Nick. So I will be moderating throughout today's webinar, and it is my greatest pleasure to introduce our first artist, Tamilala Shobo-Maheen. She's also a sophomore at Woodside Priory. She's a self-taught artist who utilizes her skills to promote events, create flyers, and posters for the nonprofit Street Code Academy, and has designed the cover of a published novel. She's also the co-creator and co-leader of the Black Student Union at Priory, and works to create a more diverse environment in her school. In her free time, she loves to read, draw, and write. And so, Tammy, you may take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and just allowing me to share my art today. So I'll share my screen. And okay, so I'm going to be highlighting 3 of the art pieces that I've made over the past few years. So I'm going to start with this one, which is a piece I made last year in 2021. And I actually designed this piece for the Doodle for Google challenge, in which I was responding to the prompt, I am strong because. And when I was thinking about this prompt and I was brainstorming what makes me strong and like what has brought me to where I am today. One thing that just kept coming up was my family and my ancestry and just the different stories that are in my family. So there's me in the middle, and there are my parents, and on both sides of my parents are my grandparents. So this is my grandpa, and this is my grandma, and then this is also my grandpa, and this is my granny. And so I just wanted to draw them and highlight their beauty, and also highlight their experiences with some of the things on the top here. So my grandpa was originally from Nigeria, and he immigrated here when he was 18 years old for college, and he stayed here and started a family, but he never forgot his Nigerian culture, and he passed that on to my dad, who passed it on to me. And it's a big part of my identity. The food, the clothes, just the dancing, the spirit of being a Nigerian person is what makes me me. And I don't want to forget that ever. And that's something I want to share with you all. So there are just some pictures. My great grandfather was actually the chief of the village. And so there's some pictures of him and just some drawings of what made up my grandpa, my grandma, and my dad. And then on my mom's side here, we have my grandpa, my granny, and their ancestry, their ancestors and my ancestors were actually brought here during slavery times. And so they had to live through slavery and Jim Crow laws and just the segregation and all of that. And that's also something I don't want to forget, even though it's really hard to think about. That was something that their parents went through and their ancestors went through, and that shaped their experience here in America, which ultimately shaped my mom, which ultimately shaped me. So yeah, I really love this piece just because it highlights the diversity of the Black experience in America. Two very separate stories, but two that are very impactful. And I hope to highlight them both in the way that I live my life. And in the background, there are just some words that reflect them and their experience. And so that's the first piece. And then here's the second piece that I made. And I made this this year, I think, more recently. And this was in response to the conversation that's going on about critical race theory all over America, but specifically in the South. And it's a conversation that really hits home for me because I think that, like it says here, we need to remember the past so that we can change the future and that we can create a better future for Black youth and then Black adults and everyone everywhere. And so the idea that critical race theory is not being taught and it's something that's being shut down is one that's very hurtful to me. So I wanted to express that in my art and to kind of speak out against all the people who are going against critical race theory. So here are some pictures like Harriet Tubman and Malcolm X and just Native American experience in America, segregation, all these things that are getting erased in American history because of all these arbitrary ideas. And so what we're really focusing on is all these people like Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, all these people that we kind of idolize, put on our dollar bills that did really good things for the history of America. But we can't forget that the Black experience and the Native American experience in America, because that ultimately is what shapes it. And there's not one side of it. We need to embrace all of it and learn all of it so we can make a more equitable future for everyone. And then this third piece is a little more pop culture-y, a little more fun. This is my little brother as Spider-Man. You can't really see his face because it's covered by a mask. But I chose this piece to highlight because it is really important to me because it highlights the importance of representation in the media, especially in television. And for so long, there wasn't any Black superheroes, no one that I could look up to, my little brother could look up to see himself in a hero role. And then came along Black Panther and came along Miles Morales. And that was such a big step in the right direction because we were seeing more representation in the media and we were seeing ourselves as people who could be heroes, as people who had diverse experiences in America and around the world. And so it's really special to me because I know how much diversity in the media has affected my own life. I grew up watching Doc McStuffins, and like that shaped everything I wanted to be. I wanted to be a doctor so bad because I saw a Black girl on TV who was a doctor. And I don't want to do that anymore because I don't like blood. But I do want to become an animator and an artist so I can share those stories through my art and just inspire people like I've been inspired by the media I consume through my life. So those are my 3 pieces. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Temi. That was beautiful. And your story about your family and your connection to them is amazing and always lovely to hear. I think the next to be introduced will be introduced by Austin and Karla.
Thank you so much. So I'm introducing Emily. Emily is a senior at Crystal Springs Upland School who has a passion for art and advocacy. Involved in diversity work and community engagement, she's interested in exploring the intersection of the Asian American experience and the artistic expression of the youth. Through Inscape, she hopes to uplift and empower the voices of AAPI students around the Bay Area. And outside of Inscape, Emily enjoys trying new foods and making Spotify playlists. Karla?
And I will now be introducing Michelle. So Michelle is a junior at Crystal Springs, and she's passionate about making a positive change through creativity and collaboration. In her free time, she enjoys painting, tinkering around the kitchen, playing around with Just Dance with family, and reading. Inspired by experiences and knowledge gained while co-leading Asian Culture Club and planning AAPI Heritage Month programs, Michelle and Emily co-founded Inscape in May of 2021 to share the stories and voices of AAPI youth and ultimately prompt reflection and celebrate achievements and empower the larger community. So you guys can take it away.
Great, thank you. Let me just share my screen really quick. All right, great. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Emily Gao, and Michelle and I are here today to basically talk about and represent our magazine that we founded called Inscape Magazine, and it's dedicated towards uplifting the creative expression of AAPI youth. Inscape Magazine is a student-run digital publication dedicated to uplifting the creative expression and voices of AAPI youth. Michelle?
And so against the backdrop of rising hate and violence towards the AAPI community, we founded Inscape in hopes of sharing our message of unity and appreciation by highlighting what makes our culture, communities, and identities unique. And thus, through Inscape, we hope to celebrate creative storytelling, redefine and individuality of human experience, and which is why we hope to prompt reflection, reshape perceptions, and empower the greater community by celebrating this type of creative expression.
Great. So this is we have some excerpts from our first issue of Inscape Magazine titled Forward, and we just wanted to share with you guys some pieces and some excerpts of written poetry and art.
So this piece on the right was written by a current senior at Crystal named Isabel, and since she's not here today, we'll be reading an excerpt of this poem on her behalf. So to start, each day you trudge through muddied rivers in a 5-mile trek to get to your school so you can dig yourself out of this farmer's town, where you've climbed fences to steal scraps from your neighbors, where the winters are so cold that your piss freezes midstream, where your friend pulls out a gun because it makes his eyes sparkle with thoughts of America. America, you think, as you claw your way up to the top of your class, because education is the only way to get out of this country, to never have to stand in a wide open square and shout until you are dizzy from tear gas. And when you finally graduate and leave, you are penniless. But you don't look back on what you left behind, not when you can attend grad school in the States and polish your English, hating that accent you can never quite get rid of.
Thank you, Michelle. Very beautiful. Isabel is a really great writer, and we are honored to feature her work in our magazine. Next, let's see, okay. We have some photography and artwork from other submitters of our magazine. The left side is actually a photo that I took, and I will be talking a little bit about that today. This is a photo that I took, I believe, in 2019 in Guangzhou, and it's actually in like a minority village of Guangzhou. And while I was there, when I was visiting that area, I had learned that it had sort of become a tourist area, even though it was initially meant to be just a space for Indigenous / minority Chinese people living in Guangzhou. And I just thought it was really interesting the way that they obviously were just like living their regular lives, but all of a sudden the tourism industry had suddenly plagued their small town, and what had since been like a very tight-knit community had become sort of a very like touristy, capitalisty area. And I just thought it was interesting, and I wanted to highlight the diverse experiences of the minorities in China that often don't really get spotlighted in media like this. And so I thought it was really, really moving. Yeah. And so that is all we have for today. If you'd like, you can check us out at inscapemag.com or scan this fun little QR code to learn more. And yeah, thank you guys so much for having us on here. It's great to be able to share our work and share our voices. And yeah, thank you.
Your magazine is inspiring, and I'm so glad you guys came to share your experiences and your stories. And so seeing as Erika is not here just yet, we will move on to the questions that we have prepared for the panelists. As a BIPOC youth, what is your experience living in San Mateo County? What would you say has been something impactful about living in San Mateo County? And this is for all of the panelists, so we will go round robin. We can start off with Tamilala.
Okay. Yeah, so when I think about what my experience as like a Black girl in San Mateo County, I was reflecting on this question, and it's a pretty complicated experience because it is one where I'm not represented in a lot of the spaces that I inhabit, like in my school, like in my soccer team, and just spaces where I find community is not one where I'm surrounded by a lot of other people who look like me or have the same experiences I have. So given that there are many challenges in that kind of experiences, microaggressions, ignorance, but it's also an experience of like great power because I know where I come from, and my parents instilled in me a very big love of my culture and my family and where I come from. And so it's something that I get to share with the people around me and that I get to be really proud about and speak out about and things like this. So I've been able to find a really loving community with the, other people who share my experiences around me. And so it has been a hard experience being a Black girl in San Mateo County, but it's also one that I really treasure and that has shaped me for the better.
All right, thank you, Tammy. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to continue with the questions. We're going to continue with Tammy, and then after that, we will move to Erika's presentation. The next question is, why is it important, or what would you like to share about BIPOC youth aspiration for their future in San Mateo County?
Yeah, so for me personally, some of my aspirations for the future is just to create more diverse environments and create a more open environment where people feel safe and feel comfortable to share their experience, but also where they can find other people where they relate to their experience, because that's so important to be represented in the people around you, but also to share your culture with people who might not share that culture. But also just something that I kind of shared about earlier that's kind of personal to me is just seeing more representation in the media of all the diversity of what it means to be a BIPOC youth. Like, just to understand that there's no one experience, but to get all the different ranges of experiences in books and television and music. And we've come a long, long way from where we were many years ago, but we still have a ways to go. And so some of my aspirations are that there's just a more equitable future, more representation. And I hope that through my art, I can do that.
I hope for that future too, Temi. So the last question will be, why do you think it's important for people to know about BIPOC youth experiences and aspirations in San Mateo County?
Yeah, so I think it's important just because, you know, having diversity is so important, having a wide range of experiences and beliefs and just ideas, because I know for me, my culture, how I was raised, being a Black person, like that influences how I think and how I act and all these different things about me. And if you're just focused on one specific group of people, you lose all the flavor and all the good stuff that can, you know, come out by listening to other people. And so it's just a good way to hear other people's ideas, and it's important to feel represented. So by listening to other people, more people can feel represented in society. And also, like, who knows who's going to come up with the next big thing. You gotta look at everyone, because it's not just going to come from the same group every time. It's going to come from everyone. So we really got to focus on everyone and just develop everyone, give people access to education and to technology and to resources that they need to build themselves up and to create the future that we all want to see.
Thank you so much, Temi. Equitable access to resources is something extremely important and will make a brighter future for all of us. And so with that, we will move to Erika's presentation, and Nick will be introducing her.
Yeah, so Erika Ramachandran is a 9th grader at Castellia School in Palo Alto. Her passion for diversity began in the summer of 2020 when a lack of support from her friends and classmates regarding the acts of discrimination in the US inspired her to draft and pitch a paper to her school and to introduce the student diversity officer position to both middle and high school governments. She has also always loved the arts, from dancing to painting, and during the pandemic, she learned to combine this passion for diversity with her art, and she enjoys creating pieces with deeper stories and lessons. Her passion to expand and create diversity continues to grow, and she looks forward to future projects of this kind. Outside of diversity, she loves to play volleyball and to play football. Erika, whenever you're ready, take it away.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, so over the past couple of years, I started looking into how stereotypes around our community, especially in the US, surrounding BIPOC communities affect our perception of things like social media. So just recently, I read a book called Long Way Down, and I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, but it's a book about a boy whose brother is shot and killed, and he is going to seek revenge and kill his brother's murderer. And so as a result, when I was reading that book, I noticed that me and a lot of my peers kind of automatically perceived that community as a BIPOC community. And actually, a lot of people were like, oh, I just assumed it was a Black community. And that stereotype automatically hit me. And I was wondering why our society immediately turns to associate these ideas of a gang or even substance abuse with a BIPOC community. So that was when I started to see how I could convey these stereotypes through artwork. And the piece you see in front of you is a still life portraying that stereotype. So you'll notice that the box, the bottle represents alcoholism, and the box it's resting on represents other substances such as heavier drugs and how they often go hand in hand. And the teddy bear is supposed to represent how children in these communities often get forgotten because of substances in their lives that are not their fault at all. And as a result, they often turn to substances because of that lack of attention, and that creates a cycle. And what I wanted to really dive into is, why do we associate these cycles with BIPOC communities, and what can we do to change or adjust these stereotypes in our communities? So when we read books surrounding these issues, our first instinct isn't to go to, oh, it must be a Black community. So that was the idea behind this piece. And if you'll go to the next piece. All right, so this piece is kind of similarly themed, but a little bit different. So you'll notice it's a monochromatic piece. So every color in this painting is made up of orange combined with black, white, or gray. So essentially what I wanted to communicate was the one-dimensional aspect of the way people perceive BIPOC communities, especially in the United States. There is often a stereotype people go to, and I have unfortunately heard people associate BIPOC communities with things like poverty and substance abuse. And that stereotype can be very harmful when talking to people of the community and also trying to work to create a diverse environment, especially in the school setting. So essentially, I have always thought it's really important to have BIPOC youth striving to fight for change and to create diversity, especially in our Bay Area communities, because only then can we begin to break down these stereotypes and build new perspectives. So the idea is, the heart you see is that stereotype that a lot of people have based on lack of knowledge or just a lack of perspective. And the BIPOC youth in our community, by fighting to be change makers and have a seat at the table, even amongst adults, they're able to break apart these stereotypes and not only create diversity around them, but expand the notion of diversity and what it means to be passionate about diversity and care about equality for all. So that was the thoughts that went behind these two pieces, and I look forward to other projects of the type and to kind of see what that future might look like for everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing, Erika. I look forward to seeing your future work. And we have a couple questions for you about your experience and about your art. So the first one is, what has been your experience as a BIPOC youth in this county, and how has that affected you?
Yeah, so I have been incredibly privileged to have not faced extreme forms of racism or discrimination towards me, but I have seen it affect my close friends through biased teachers, or even through family members and outside peers and strangers, like judging them. And as a result, that was why I was so passionate about diversity, was because I wanted to make sure that these students had a spot and a place for them to work through their experiences and figure out how to take these experiences and turn them into positive, meaningful change, not only in their schools, but beyond that. So that was actually where, as you so kindly introduced, my proposal to introduce a student diversity officer. The idea behind that is to allow students who have had a very horrible experience with race or discrimination to have someone to go to work through those challenges.
That's amazing. Has your school begun to implement that already?
So we successfully got the proposal was successfully, they loved the proposal. So as a result, next year we will be having a diversity officer at Castellea. And my hope is that we will be able to get this position implemented into other schools around the Bay Area, because I do feel like it's important for there to be a bond of trust between the students and the faculty at a school, in order for acts of discrimination to not only be listened to, but addressed in a way where action is being created and will continue to grow.
Absolutely. So the second question we have for you is if you have anything to share about BIPOC aspirations for their own futures within San Mateo County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so everyone in the Bay Area, everyone in the world deserves to achieve whatever future they want. I think it's important that BIPOC youth continue to advocate for their rights and for equality, especially unfortunately, in a country right now where there's so much racism and discrimination going around, especially in the last couple of years, and even just in the last couple of weeks, we've seen acts of discrimination all over the United States. So it's important that BIPOC youth in the San Mateo County take charge of their own future and really advocate for what they want to see changed, because they are change makers. And even though it may not always seem like it, our perspectives as youth are equally as important as adult perspectives. And if anything, we can bring a larger range of ideas, as people were talking about earlier, to the table. So.
Yeah, I think you really touched on a lot of the main themes of our third question, but just if there's anything else you'd like to add about why it's so important for other people and adults, like you mentioned, to know about BIPOC youth experience and their own aspirations.
Yeah, so as I was saying before, like, to ensure that perspectives will never run out. There are always new ideas, always new opinions to be heard. And the most we can do as change makers is to recognize that there are these ideas and do our best to bring in new perspectives and opinions, because we cannot create a country and a community in the Bay Area and San Mateo County free of discrimination, racism, without bringing in as many perspectives as possible. So I do think that it's really important as youth change makers to be aware that we are bringing a certain perspective to the table, and there will always be 10 more behind us that we have not yet recognized or learned about. And I think that's something that's really important as a youth leader and someone who's passionate about diversity, especially in the Bay Area, is that we will never fully be educated on what we do, which is do our best to learn and promote diversity. There's always someone else who can contribute to the conversation.
Definitely. We're so lucky to have heard your perspective today. Thank you so much, Erika.
Thank you so much, Erika.
Okay.
You did amazing, and I'm gonna give it to Karla now to continue to ask our second presenter, Michelle, the next couple questions.
Yes, so now we're going to direct these questions back towards Michelle. So first, just wanted to ask again, what would you like to share about experiences with BIPOC youth in San Mateo County, or as much as you can attest to?
Well, I think adding on to what the previous presenters and panelists have said, it's really so important for us to hear, if not amplify, the voices and experiences of youth in the community. And it's really just another dimension to our narrative that shouldn't be ignored. And I think for Emily and I, that's also the reason why we chose forward as the theme for our first issue. I mean, minus the pun on the whole forward and then 4 words of a novel, but to us, we thought that that in itself represented a start to a new paragraph in our narrative together as a community, especially as during that time we were facing and seeing those rising rates of hate towards the API community. So we thought that this issue would kind of be a representation of a new forward in which particularly the voices of API youth are better heard, understood, and supported.
Well, I really love that, and I think that parallels a lot with, I don't know if anyone here in the group has heard of Afrofuturism, which is a special genre of books pertaining to those who identify with the African diaspora. And what it does is exactly what you said. It tries to shift the narrative onto the future while acknowledging past offenses. But again, refocusing that attention towards where we're moving in the future. And I think that that's definitely something that I also see in this presentation of what you just said so eloquently. So now I'm going to ask you the second question, which is, what would you like to share about BIPOC aspirations and, bright futures of BIPOC youth in the county?
Mm-hmm. I personally think it's so important for us to not lose sight of those aspirations and to really just keep on nurturing them. And I'm definitely seeing more and more advocacy as well as student voices being represented as part of a greater community and in impactful decisions. And it's a trend that I really hope will continue for future generations, if not become a much more prominent thing in communities all around America and the world. And I think, as previous panelists have mentioned, it's so important for us to continue fighting for this change and for that seat at the table so as to break the negative stereotypes and expand really the notion of diversity in our community. So
I love that response. And again, just tying back why it's important to share about the issues from people who are inherently affected by it, right? Like when we're talking about violence towards the AAPI community, we need to hear the voices of those who identify as AAPI, right? So great response. And then last question, why do you think it's important for people to know about BIPOC youth experiences and aspirations in San Mateo County? Like, what is the significance?
Right. I think like for us to become a better community together, we should and we really have to be engaged and supportive of each other, which involves being active listeners and listening to each other, our peers, our neighbors, etc., for a more equitable future that's with more representation as well. And as the other panelists so artfully stated, perspectives really never do run out, and especially with how important firsthand recounts are, like the value of firsthand perspective is really nothing to be understated. And I think together, what we always want to remember is the fact that we are here as a community, which applies not one, but all of us together in unity. And I think that is how we can work towards improving ourselves and improving the future for future generations.
I love it. Unity, compassion, and listening to each other. It's great, and it really encapsulates the purpose of all of this. So now I'm going to hand it over actually to Austin, and he can take over. Thank you so much for your responses, Michelle.
Thank you, Karla, and thank you, Michelle. Valeria, did you have something to say before I go into Youth Commission responses?
Nope, but I'm very excited to hear it.
All right, perfect. So we asked youth commissioners what their experiences were as BIPOC youth in the county. They shared that they felt that BIPOC youth were underrepresented in some regions, while they were represented heavily in others. And they shared that they feel that many programs are available to assist BIPOC youth, but youth are often unaware of these programs, such as the Community Affairs Program. They shared that it's amazing to have such a diverse community in San Mateo County, and it's incredible how BIPOC youth are able to create and maintain support systems for one another. So then when we asked them the second question, why it was important, what they'd like to share about BIPOC aspirations about the future in San Mateo County, they shared that more could be done to include youth of color in county decision-making. Communities hope to have more representation, and that BIPOC youth should become the future county leaders in government and in other leadership positions. The future should ultimately be about making space for BIPOC youth. But they shared that families more often focus on developing financial stability, especially for the next generation of youth. And then we asked them lastly, also why they think it's important for people to know about BIPOC youth experiences and aspirations in San Mateo County. And they shared that BIPOC youth have an incredible amount to contribute, and that they are the next generation of the workforce. Legislation often directly impacts them, and it's important that they have a say and are directly impacting legislation. And if the community doesn't discuss BIPOC youth, we can't work towards progress. And so we need everyone's support, especially those in power, for progress.
Thank you, Austin. That presentation was a reflection of some BIPOC youth from the Youth Commission, and we really, really love to hear their thoughts and opinions. And so I will now hand it off to Shireen to Q&A or to close us off.
Wow, just wow. You have all completely wowed us. I am beyond impressed and inspired by all the leadership, the thoughtfulness, the depth that you all brought to us today, and the beauty of the art that you shared with us, and the foresight that you all had and have. We don't have any questions from the audience, but I do want to ask you all a question to reflect on. You know, as an adult, I'm really thinking here as I hear about your aspirations and the beautiful vision that you all set forth and the great leadership that you bring. I want to know what advice you have for us. So what advice would you have for adults that will listen to this, and about how we can support your aspirations, the aspirations of BIPOC youth as you have shared it with us today? what advice would you give us? And anyone can speak up on the panel.
Yeah, so I can try and answer that. But first and foremost, I would say just to, keep listening, because as some of the other panelists were saying, BIPOC youth have so much to offer, and they can't offer that if no one is going to listen to them, if no one's going to listen to us. So keep listening and just listen with the ear of your heart, listen non-judgmentally, because it's so important that you get that experience, because we know our experiences better than anyone else. And the second thing I was going to say is just to create more ways for BIPOC youth to, get into leadership positions, to grow up where they have equal opportunities to get good jobs and to get paid as much as other people, just to keep building a world and creating a world in which everyone is treated equitably and everyone has equal opportunity and equal ability to do whatever they want to do in their lives.
I love that.
I can go ahead and add on to what she said. I do think it's extremely important for adults to provide a listening ear and to also be there as a place of support as we are drafting these ideas and ideas and proposals for change for the future, is to not only listen, but it should be a question of when can we implement these ideas? How can we implement these ideas? Not if we should. Because BIPOC youth have a lot to offer, as the previous speaker said. We have a lot of ideas and aspirations for the future, and adults really should be doing their best to not only listen to those ideas, but figure out how to put them into action long term.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what's been said. And I think on both sides, really, for both adults and students, we all have to learn how to embrace change. There has to be also this degree of mutual trust and confidence between the adults and youth. And I think what's really important is for the fact that the youth's voices, they feel respected at the table. They feel like they have a place there. And like Erika mentioned, for the adult to be willing to provide the additional support, the additional opportunity, and just willing to embrace the change and to embrace maybe the uncertainty that comes with the change, to just take that step forward and have trust in what we're trying to say.
It's beautiful. Any more advice for us grown-ups? Well, certainly if other thoughts come up, feel free, but I just feel like we have really heard something very important, that we need to keep listening and have a listening ear. And how beautiful to think about listening with an ear of our heart. I love the idea that we need to create more ways to support BIPOC youth into leadership roles and work towards equity, and also not just to listen, but also to really support and implement the ideas that youth bring, and to implement them and embrace the change that people have, that youth raise with us, and take a little bit of risk with the uncertainty that change will bring us, knowing that we can trust the BIPOC youth leaders. I see, Carla, you've raised your hand. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, as a youth and you're asking for advice, I think it's also not just being there and being supportive, it's also looking out for. There's a lot of time, I think a lot of us are at this very critical age where we're starting to learn how to advocate for ourselves. And so I think something that'll happen pretty often is an adult will be like, you got it, right? And then, because of that power dynamic, a lot of youth will just immediately be like, yeah, I got it. I can figure it out. And sometimes it's really important to check in with them, with the youth, and just be like, hey, do you really know? No shade and not knowing, but this is what a policy, drafted policy should look like. Or, you know, this is someone you should represent, or this is someone I can connect you with, which I think actually Saba, who looks over the Youth Commission, does very well in helping us with, always connecting us with others, because we're all so new to this that we don't really know about those connections or where to reach out to first. So also just looking out for the youth.
Valeria?
I think Carla made a really good point, in looking out for the youth also means making sure that all the youth have equitable resources and are all able to access the resources they need to succeed. And, you know, because of the way our county is, how diverse it is, some people might have access to resources, others don't. And so making sure we're uplifting everyone so that it's an equal playing field is extremely important.
I hope any other adults listening are taking notes like I am, looking out for youth to just have those trusted relationships where we can say, listen, we're here for you. It's okay not to know. We can help you. Making those connections and being supporting partners. I think it's really heartening to know that we have a great example, Saba who supports the Youth Commission, as someone that we can go to for a model for this type of leadership. I want to thank each and every panelist. I want to thank all the attendees who joined us today. I want to thank all those who are going to be listening to this video later on. I can't say how impressed and inspired I am by the youth here. I have two young children of my own, a 6 and an 8-year-old. They are Black, Middle Eastern, and I look to all of you to really help be models for the kind of leaders that they can be and help shape our future. And as a Chief Equity Officer for San Mateo County, really looking to implement equity, I'm so heartened to know that you are in our communities, you are our leaders, and you're our leaders now. So please make sure that you bring any ideas as youth to the Youth Commission, to me, to other adults, because we would like to support you in implementing those outcomes. So thank you also to the wonderful Youth Commission subcommittee, Valeria Chavez-Franco, Karla Aguilar, Nicholas Reed, and Austin Willis, for really coming together and bringing this wonderful inspirational panel to us. You do represent how the change that we want to see, and thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. We'd appreciate it if you tell us how we did with this program, going to smcl.org/rate this event, and we'll put that in the chat. And if you missed any part of our Equity Through Art series, please do go to the San Mateo County Library YouTube channel, which we'll also provide in the chat, to go ahead and visit all those other recordings. Thank you everyone for being with us, and have a good evening. Goodbye, everyone.